right, starting the show today with CNN. CNN, go CNN. Come on.
Just into CNN, Donald Trump wrapping up a speech moments ago in Iowa. It is the first time he's spoken since he announced he is a target of special counsel Jack Smith's probe into his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And he said this.
All right, before we hear from President Trump, welcome to GAMcast, GAMcast Live for July 19th, 2023. We're going to go over the news of the day, which is basically going to be the pending, soon-to-be Trump indictment over January 6th that broke last night, as well as the actual indictment of the so-called fake, they're not fake, they're alternate electors in Michigan. We're going to break all that down for you. There really isn't any other news. It's a very slow news day. You can tell this is coordinated by the media, but we're going to break it down as we always do based on the law, the Constitution, and histoire, so that you understand what's going on here. And I have written extensively. Today's show, I'm going to go over 4 articles, 2 of them in great detail, but 4 of them that I wrote. I think I have 5, maybe. If you can view these videos, I probably have about 20 videos on this January 6th subject. I'm well versed in it. I've been following it from the beginning. It is just, spoiler alert, it has been a hoax from beginning to end, and by the time you finish with this live stream, which is probably going to take me 45 minutes to an hour, you are going to be well versed in the law and the facts, and you can defend this garbage from any of these so-called journalists or even lawyers who are starting to put this stuff forward. This is a hoax. It has been a hoax from the very beginning, and the fact that they are bringing January 6th into this, right, they are headlong. I think this is a mistake on their part. But before I get to breaking all that down, let me tell you why I think they're doing it. I think at this point they're in for a penny, they're in for a pound. So Bragg went first, and then Jack Smith followed with the document hoax, and now he figures, well, and what you're going to see, folks, is a floodgate. Jack Smith is going to bring every single solitary claim he can against Trump. That'll include the January 6th, which we're going to cover today in great detail. Probably also going to see an incitement charge, which is garbage, but you're going to see it because we're not operating under the rule of law anymore, and that's very clear. And again, at the end of the show today, you're going to have all the legal backup and all the factual backup you'll need to defend that argument. Also, same thing with the electors in Michigan. Every place where they can do it, they will do it. And let me go ahead and tell you where they can't do it. In Michigan, they can do it. In Pennsylvania, they can do it. Wisconsin, they can probably do it because Wisconsin is now controlled by Democrats. In places where they can't do it, you probably won't see it in Georgia because Kemp and Roethlisberger, they're not going to do it. And they're the ones who have the power to prosecute what happened because Georgia also sent an alternate slate. But anyway, without further ado, let's hear a little bit from President Trump, and then I'm going to jump right into breaking down January 6th and proving to you that this is all basically nonsense, a hoax. It's all show trials. I mean, folks, I hate to tell you this. I've tweeted it before, but it's true. You're living in the early 1930s Germany. I mean, this is just pure fascism. It is, the law is whatever I say it is. You can obstruct a proceeding by just showing up to view Congress. At the end of the show, you'll see what I'm talking about. But let's hear from Trump and we'll go forward.
Faces a third possible indictment.
We have a man, the only way he can get elected is to weaponize the Justice Department, which he's gone around doing. I didn't know practically what a subpoena was and grand juries and all of this. Now I'm like becoming an expert. I have no choice because we have to. It's a disgrace. If you say something about an election, they want to put you in jail for the rest of your life. We have prosecutors that are evil people. These are evil people, deranged. I call them deranged.
All right, I'm going to move on. What he said there, frankly, is accurate. But let's get to a little bit more meat and substance here. Here's the New York Crimes. In the Great American Mail, we don't go. I'm not going to go to Fox, even though Fox is not really right-wing. I'm not going to go to Daily Wire. I'm not going to go to conservative outlets. I'm going to go to left-wing outlets and debunk them using their own material. It's very simple to do. All you have to have is at this point, some basic knowledge. They've dumbed them down to this point. So target letter to Trump raises possibility of obstruction and fraud charges. So here's what happened. He convened a grand jury. This grand jury is not in Florida because the substance of the events that took place here are crimes against the federal government, and they also took place in D.C. So that's in D.C. A lot more friendly venue for Jack Smith. He's going to have a lot more Democrat judges. Even the Republican judges are going to lean Democrat, and he's going to have very, very friendly jury pool. The jury pool there is going to be 92, 93 anti-Trump. So, it's a good venue for him. Now, he sent a letter. This is the way this works. You convene a grand jury. There's a lot of stuff going on the internet right now that talks about this idea that, well, it's a special counsel. That's not Biden. You can't blame Biden for that. And then it's not the special counsel even that's indicting him. Well, it's the grand jury. Now, look, folks, that's just idiocy. All right. If you tell me, hey, Great American Mill, I want you to convene a study that will say what's the greatest franchise in football history, I guarantee you it will come out that it's the Dallas Cowboys. Why? Because I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan and I know who to put on the committee. All right. I can call them independent. I can say whatever I want. Now, look, that's just a fact. Everybody understands that's just basic. I don't really have a problem with the fact that Jack Smith is biased. I have a problem with him not following the rule of law, and you're going to understand how far-afield he is when we finish this podcast. But anyway, getting back to the point. So forget about that. Of course he's biased. But just to show I'm fair, Republican special prosecutors that are appointed are also going to lean Republican. There's no question that John Durham did, but he wasn't very much. But I don't want to get into that conversation today. It's a different conversation. Second thing, here's the way grand juries works. You do not have a right to present your side. They have no obligation, although ethically they should, but they have no obligation to present exculpatory evidence or possible defenses. So what do you think they do? They never do. Okay, so basically you convene a grand jury, you show them only what you want to see, and then you go, hey, based on everything you've seen, right, of course, what kind of a moron would put anything in front of them that doesn't back up their story, right? How do you say? Well, of course they come out the way unless you're a complete imbecile, which Jack Smith is a lot of things. I don't think he's scholarly, but I don't think he's an imbecile, right? Anyway, so of course they're going to indict. And this whole target letter business is a formality, and it's also a trick. You send it to them and go, hey, would you like to come to the grand jury? Now, I want you to understand this too. You can come if you want, but guess what you can't do? Bring your lawyer. Now, you can stop and go, hold on a second, I need to go consult my lawyer, which of course looks bad. And so for that reason, it's not wise to go to the grand jury. And if you do go, it's not wise to go, let me pause and go to my lawyer, because of course they're going to take a bad inference from that. They shouldn't, but they will. So anyway, this is all a trick. But here's the point of the lawyer letter that Trump revealed, okay? Again, this is from the New York Times. Blah, 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 blah. He's gotten a letter. Here are the potential crimes. And again, just so you know, and I've been covering this first theory was posited March of 2022. So it is that old. It's over almost a year and a half old. This came out of a case out of California. I've covered it before on the podcast. I wrote about it on Substack. We're going to go over it. This is when they were trying to pierce Trump's attorney-client privilege. In order to do that, you have to say there's a crime fraud exception here. Then you have to say, what are the crimes? Guess what the two crimes, or actually they put 3 crimes forward. This is the January 6th committee. They put 3 crimes forward. 2 of the ones that they put forward magically are in Jack Smith's letter. You think that's a coincidence? Of course it's not a coincidence. And this was way back in March when the order came out. It was March 22nd of 2022. The whole left was in a joy. I mean, you'd have thought that Moses had parted the sea the way they acted. They were just overjoyed that this judge out in California found a crowd fraud exception, in fact, did apply. That means Trump doesn't have any attorney-client privilege. And they said, here you go. Here's the roadmap. And now a year and a half later, here we go. Special counsel's been appointed and the same things. What are they? All right, well, they're right here. They are, but both the House committee that scrutinized January 6th, as I said, and federal judge in California, that what happened was the January 6th committee sent subpoenas to everybody under the sun. If you objected to it, which Trump did, and said, hey, well, some of these documents you don't get to get because they're attorney-client privilege. The committee ran to California, and the federal said, hey, that's not a privilege, federal crime fraud exception. Judge said, what are the 3 crimes? They said the 2 that we're going to talk about and one other, and said common law fraud. He punted on common law fraud. He didn't say it didn't happen. He just said, I don't need to reach it because I've already found 2 crimes. Why would I look for a third? That's what he said in the opinion. I've read it. I know it backwards and forwards. We're going to bring it up here later today, as you'll see. Anyway, so that was when they established the idea. And this one is called, under Section 1512 of Title 18 of the United States Code, such a crime would be punishable for 20 years, okay? And that's to corruptly obstruct Congress's session. Okay, now I want you to understand it, just right off the top of the bat, you don't even need to be a lawyer. So when Trump tried to corruptly obstruct Congress's session to certify Mr. Biden's electoral victory under Section 1512, right, that is obstructing a congressional proceeding, and you get 20 years. Now that ought to strike you as odd. What in the world did he do to obstruct a proceeding? And we're going to get to that because there's two things you could potentially argue he did. And spoiler alert, he's not going to argue the riot, folks. That's what's so shocking here. And that's what's going to throw a lot of people that don't really follow the stuff for a loop. The second thing is so-called conspiring to defraud the government and to make false statements. Both the federal court judge in California and the January 6th committee also said there was evidence that Mr. Trump violated Section 371 of Title 18, which makes a crime punishable but 5 years in prison, to conspire with another person to defraud the government. We're going to go over both these in a minute, okay? But before I do that, well, actually, let me do it that way because I was going to cover Rachel Maddow next, but let me skip forward and go over these two statutes. So here's 18 U.S. Code 1512, tampering with a witness, victim, or an informant. That's otherwise in here. If you look in here, that's obstructing Congress. Okay, 371, 18 U.S. Code 371, conspiracy to commit offense or to defraud the United States. Right, that ought to strike lawyers as odd because here's the problem with that. Conspiracy is not an offense in and of itself. It's not. Conspiracy to commit offense is, but you have to have an underlying offense. What's his underlying offense? The reason these two are going to dovetail, the New York crimes is making it look like it's two crimes. It's not. It's one, it's going to be obstructing Congress, and then two, conspiring to obstruct Congress. So if the first one goes, the second one goes. But importantly, and I talk about this all the time on the show, they're trying to whittle down these constitutional legal principles that go back to the Roman days to nothing. They want a quote-unquote democracy, which is, hey, did we get elected? Yeah, you did. Then we can tell you to do anything. We can put a jab in your arm. We can tell you to buy insurance. We can tell you to get vaccinated. We can tell you when to buy a car. We can do anything. You have no rights. That's what they believe, folks. They don't say it quite that abruptly, but that's what they believe. So just so we understand what's going on here, let's back it up and understand what's going on here. Basically, Trump obstructed the Congress, which was Biden's certification on January 6th, okay? And he conspired to do it. Those are the crimes that are going forward. They've already gotten a judge to say, yes, I believe by a preponderance of the evidence he committed those crimes. One quick thing I have to say before we go on. Jack Smith is going to have if he goes with this, he's going to have which he will. He's going to have a higher burden. So the judge, all he had to find was a preponderance of evidence that he committed those crimes, not beyond a reasonable doubt. Smith will have to prove them beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's not a problem. It's D.C. Anything they say that Trump did, they're going to buy it. So that's not really much of an issue. But I want you to understand, this was a video that circulated back shortly after Trump won, and in advance of January 6, 2017. This is, well, let me let you listen to it. And I want you to understand first, before I get to later, which I'm going to get to what they call the obstruction here, but I want you to listen to these Hollywood actors. And now that you understand that it is a potential crime to obstruct the certification of Biden, listen to this.
Republican members of the Electoral College, this message is for you. As you know, our founding fathers built the Electoral College to safeguard the American people from the dangers of a demagogue and to ensure that the presidency only goes to someone who is to an eminent degree endowed with the requisite qualifications.
An eminent degree. Someone who is highly qualified for the job.
The Electoral College was created specifically to prevent an unfit candidate from becoming president.
There are 538 members of the Electoral College. You
and just 36 other conscientious Republican electors can make a difference
by voting your conscience on December 19th.
And thereby shaping the future of our nation.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
As you know, the Constitution gives electors the right to vote for any eligible person.
Any eligible person, no matter which party they belong to.
But it should certainly be someone you consider especially...
All right, that's enough. So this was a group of left-wing people who in 2017, on January 6th, or anticipation of January 6th, 2017, were trying to get people to vote against Trump. They needed 37, I believe, because his margin of victory was 306 to 240. So if they could flip 37 to not vote for Trump, or to vote for Hillary would be great. But if not, that they would basically secure the election for Hillary Clinton. Now, folks, I want you to understand that this is This is not unconstitutional. There have been faithless electors in the past. Believe it or not, Reagan won in 1980, and I think he had over 400, so it was not in doubt what was going to happen. But one person actually who had pledged to vote for Reagan actually voted for somebody else. I think he voted for John Anderson or something. It doesn't really matter. The point is, it's not unconstitutional to do that. Is it inappropriate? Is it undemocratic? Should you do what you were pledged to do? Sure. But there's nothing illegal about it or inappropriate in that regard. Did any of these people get brought up on charges for trying to obstruct a congressional proceeding and face 20 years? Or conspiracy, because there's more than one, or there's more than two, right? There's two or more, so that's conspiracy. No, they weren't. You know why? Because it's America. And even though you're urging somebody to do something that is inappropriate, it's not illegal, and you're not obstructing a congressional proceeding. What is obstructing a congressional proceeding? It's always been understood to mean, right, you have to do something serious, like bribe someone, right, capture somebody. Let's say, for example, you had a bill, and you need, I think you need 218 to pass it in the Congress, depending on how much of a quorum you have. It doesn't matter. You get the point. And I capture 50 of them. Well, of course, that would be obstructing Congress. Right? But that's not the type of thing where we just disagree. If you go to the Congress to lobby them to vote against something, that's not obstructing the Congress. I mean, by this definition, if what they're about to charge Trump with is obstructing Congress, right, then everything is obstructing Congress. Right? Protesting outside of it about abortion or about pro-choice would be technically obstructing. That means anyone could be charged if we don't like what you do. And it has First Amendment implications, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, there's a real problem with that, and that's exactly where they're going with this. And I just wanted to show you the utter hypocrisy of it. So I've written about this before, and I want you to also understand basically what's going on here and why this is really such a real big problem for our constitutional republic going forward, and the outright hypocrisy of the Democrats in this particular instance. Okay, so I wrote this article. This is from April 30th of 2022. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, one, I've written about this extensively. There's a lot of information you need to know that are in these articles. It's just easier for me to pull it up this way. If unfortunately, Twitter will not allow me to paste it into the tweet. I'll try to go in later today and do a reply to put these. But if you go to the YouTube channel, which would help us if you do, and subscribe, or if you're listening to it on Rumble later, that you can get them there. I'm going to paste in there all four of the links to these articles, because the articles then give you the links you need to get to other things. But here's basically what's going on. And again, the roadmap was the January 6th committee. When they went to the judge and said, here are the three crimes. Jack Smith has not added a single solitary thing. He's basically, working on the back of the January 6th committee, okay? And here's what they claim: that Trump obstructed the congressional proceeding on to count the electoral votes on January 6th in violation of 18 USC 1512. That is directly from the opinion. That is directly from the brief of the January 6th committee. Here, I'll highlight it if you're following us. If you're watching on Twitter or YouTube, you can see that. There it is right there. That's exactly what they're saying. So they're saying, how did you obstruct Congress? They're not saying it was the riot. They're not saying it was having the rally, because that would obviously have First Amendment implications, incitement, among other things. They're saying you trying to challenge Biden's certification is the obstruction. Now, we're going to go over that in a bit, because the Electoral Count Act of 1877 and the 12th Amendment give Trump the specific right to do what he did. So what they're saying is, folks, I want you to understand, what they're saying is objecting to the certification itself is obstruction. I cannot stress enough how I was going to use profanity. I don't use profanity in Great American Male. You know what I was going to say. It starts with a B and ends with crazy. That is insanity. That's like saying, if you're charged with a crime and you go in and you plead not guilty, you're obstructing this criminal proceeding. How? By pleading. Well, you asked me how I pled. Yeah, well, you pled not guilty. That's obstruction, right? I mean, that's literally what they're saying. And the second thing they said, again, I'll highlight number 2, that Trump and Eastman and others entered into agreement to defraud the United States by interfering with the certification process. Same thing. So, hey, you interfered, and I guess because you had other people working with you, that's a conspiracy. Again, it's piggybacking on that. But again, this is an important point. In their minds, that's a separate crime. I can tell you right now, this is laughable to any lawyer who's ever practiced law, this is a joke. Conspiracy is always a subset of another crime. First, you have to prove that crime. Then you can tack on conspiracy, but you can't have conspiracy standing by itself. But they don't care about the rule of law. The third, again, was that they engaged in common law fraud. I don't know if Smith's going to go with that. Again, the judge didn't rule on that when he punted. All right. But just so you know, I pulled up the judge's opinion. Here's the judge's opinion right there. Again, where he basically discusses the potential crimes or fraud. And he lays them all out here. These are directly from the brief. I'm going to skip ahead because it's going to take a while to get through all this stuff as it is. But just trust me on this. If you can read the opinion. And by the way, if you pull up this article, I'll give you the link to it. You can click right here. I'll highlight it for you. You can click right there and you can pull up the opinion yourself. That's all I did. Just click and it'll pop up. You can read the thing. It's about 45 pages. I've read the whole thing several times. And he basically goes through all the elements. And folks, this is what's so scary. He basically, the fact that Trump challenged Biden's certification is obstruction. You got to understand that is exactly what it is. And in fact, let's get to that. Just to prove the point, here's Liz Cheney. Where's Liz? Liz, where are you, Liz? Come on, Liz. I know you're here. Where are you, Liz? There she is. There's Liz Cheney. All right. But in fact, let me back up before we get to Liz Cheney. And so you understand the gravity of where we are. And again, this is not far-fetched in terms of politics if you think about it. The problem here is not the politics. The problem is the overriding and the disregarding of the rule of law. Okay, I get it. You got to understand, and this goes back. They were saying this for a while. When Trump, after the election, and Trump didn't like the way things came out. He was yelling fraud, fraud, fraud. He was running to courts. The courts, I think he filed 65 cases, and almost all of them were resolved on standing or procedural grounds, which means the courts basically said you don't have standing or you can't go forward. And I want you to understand how that works out. How that works out is you go down to, say, Fulton County and say, hey, I was on the ballot in Fulton County, and I would like to challenge. I'd like to see all the ballots because I think there's some fraud here. I think people voted that weren't registered. I think there weren't signature matches, et cetera, et cetera. In Fulton County, you sue them in the Superior Court, and the judge comes and says, well, you don't have standing to do that. You can't do that. There's no procedural way to do that. I mean, we'll do a recount. No, I don't want to do a recount. I don't want to do a recount because I understand that you counted the ballots that came in. I get that. And if you recount them, you're going to be doing one or two. And so I understand that. I don't want that. I want to look at the actual ballots because I think, 50,000 of them are forged, improper ballots that ought to be tossed out. Do you understand? I want you to understand this. Do you know what your remedy is in the United States of America in 2020 is the relevant point, but it's the same thing here. You know what your remedy is? No, you can't do that. Well, what's my remedy? You can ask Fulton County if they'll do it. Well, but Fulton County said they won't do it. And to the extent they said they will do it, they say, yeah, we checked and yeah, we did a good job. Yeah, we checked and there's no fraud. Well, what kind of system is that? I mean, I want you to understand, folks, we're now 3 years later and no substantive audit has been done at all. So, and again, that's fine. But what should be happening is by now we should be setting up procedures so that in the future, if you want to do that, and you know what, folks, if you want to maybe put some of the burden on the candidate to pay for that, fine. But the idea that you don't have it, but anyway, so Trump's filing all these lawsuits. Court after court after court is going, you don't have standing. I'm not even going to let you look at the ballots. I'm not going to make Fulton County do anything. Get out of this court. That was quickly we were being told, oh, well, there you go. I mean, they're finding no fraud. They're not looking. And to be fair to the courts, there's no obligation to look. Okay, so that's the law. So eventually, the last best effort for Trump at this point, and we're now probably late November, mid-December. In fact, let me go back to the article. I want to make sure I don't lose Liz. Because one of the points I make in this article was this wasn't something that was a secret to anybody. Well, I don't see it here, but the Associated Press had run with it in, when had they done it? Let's see if I can find it. Well, I can't find it now, but I thought I had it, but oh yeah, here it is right here. The fact that Trump was going to challenge the election. So when he started getting kicked out of the courts, a man named John Eastman came up with the idea to challenge Biden's certification. And it made sense because the courts are telling you, I can't help you. I can't help you. Right? So one would logically think, well, the way you go is you go down the road of the Electoral Count Act of 1877, right? And the 12th Amendment. I just show up at Biden's certification and I object. So here's right here, if you go to this article again, and I'll put it in the link, Trump's plan was well known well before January 6, 2021. There's a lot of reasons why it was well known. Among other places, the Washington Post ran articles spelling it out in detail by December 30th, 2020. The Wall Street Journal ran a piece on Trump's plan November 11th, 2020. The AP did likewise on November 19th, 2020. So the point is, they knew what Eastman and Trump were doing in other people, that they were going to challenge Biden's certifications on 7 states. And real quick on the Electoral Count Act of 1877, then we'll get to Liz Cheney. All right, here's how it works. The Electoral Count Act, and let me back up even further. You have to go, after the Civil War, you had a lot of contentious elections. Okay, you had several of them tossed to the House, the most notable of which was 1876, the election between Hayes and Tilden. And Tilden had won the popular vote. Nobody disputes that. Well, they actually do dispute it because everybody claimed there was a lot of fraud. Anyway, so eventually they meet in the Electoral College, and they can't come up with a resolution because 3 states sent 2 electors. I believe it was Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana. Don't quote me on that. I'm doing that on memory. But 3 states sent different electors. So the vice president who presided over it at that time said, hey, whoa, no. Y'all go back, figure out who it is that are legitimate electors and send them here. Well, they didn't get it done in time, and the Constitution provides it goes to the House. Well, the House at that point came up with a commission. I think it was 5 senators, 5 House members, and 5 Supreme Court justices. It doesn't matter. They came up with a commission. The commission was supposed to be bipartisan, but it was slightly tilted towards the Republican Party. And eventually, they voted to give the election to Hayes, but only after Hayes said, I tell you what, if you'll just kick this thing to me, and this will be the end of this, because the Democrats represented by Tilden, they were pretty ticked off. They said, I tell you what, if you kick it to me, I'll pull the federal troops out of Dixie. No more federal troops in the South. Y'all can go back to electing whoever you want, and that's good. Anyway. You can. It's called one of the things that's called as a great compromise. You can go back and look that up. But anyway, after that happened, the House afterwards said, hey, we got to have some kind of procedure here, because we can't have this going on. So there's now a procedure. The Electoral Count Act of 1877 provides, in summary, if you want to object to the certification of a president on January 6th, when the vice president's there and they open up the ballots, you have to have 1 congressperson and 1 senator to do it. Okay? It's not an easy thing to do. And if you do that, then the objection will be heard, and by law, by this 1877 law, the Senate has to go back to the Senate, the House has to go back to the House, and you have to debate for 2 hours, and then you come back in, and there'll be a decision on the merits of the objection. And that will be for every state of which there's an objection from at least 1 House member and at least 1 senator. Okay, that's the process of 1877. Flash forward to 2020, November, it runs in the Wall Street Journal. The 19th, it runs in the AP. By the 30th, the Washington Post is talking about it. That's what they're going to do. They're coming down on January 6th. And if you click on the link, again, you can do it yourself. I don't have time to get to it today. You'll find in these articles there were 7 states. Okay, among them was Michigan, and you heard from them yesterday, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, etc. All right, that they were going to challenge. More than enough. And the plan was, obviously, to get the objection sustained. If they couldn't get the objection sustained, well, hopefully delay the proceeding. If it didn't delay the proceeding enough to kick it to the House, well, then at least we'll get the country to focus on this, because it's going to go 2 or 3 days. I mean, by the time you sustain an objection, go back for 2 hours, go to bathroom breaks and stuff, I mean, this thing would have gone on for a couple days, minimum. And they were hoping to get some press coverage. I could bring up other videos that's beyond the scope of this one today, but that's what their plan was, okay? And in fact, just so you understand how this works, this is in one of the pieces I wrote. Here's Jamie Raskin. Yeah, that Jamie Raskin, who is a freshman member of Congress at this point, okay? And what does he do? Let's take a listen.
Mr. President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Florida seems to be regular in form and authentic, and it appears therefrom that Donald J. Trump of the state of New York received 29 votes for president, and Michael R. Pence of the state of Indiana received 29 votes for vice president.
For what purpose is member right?
By the way, this is the certification of Donald J. Trump. The vice president at the time, Joe Biden, is hearing from a member who's risen, Jamie Raskin. Here we go.
I have an objection because 10 of the 29 electoral votes cast by Florida were cast by electors not lawfully certified. because they violated Florida's prohibition against dual office holding.
Debate is out of order. Section 15 and 17 of the Title III of the United States Code require that any objection be presented in writing, signed by both members of the House of both a member of the House of Representatives and a senator. Is the objection in writing and signed not only by the member of the House of Representatives, but also by a senator?
It is in writing, Mr. President.
Is it signed by a senator?
Not as of yes, Mr. President.
In that case, the objection cannot be.
There you go. So there's Biden right there saying you don't have a senator. It's in writing, and you signed it. Obviously, you're a congressperson, but not a senator. It's out of order. Now, did Jamie Raskin get prosecuted for that? No, he didn't. Did anybody get prosecuted? Again, it's in these articles for the fact that people challenged Biden's Bush's certification in 2004. No, they didn't. Now, I wonder why that is, because we're told right here that Trump's plan to challenge Biden's certification, why it's an obstruction of a congressional proceeding. I wonder why that is. And if you think I'm exaggerating that what they're saying that, well, here we go. Now we'll get to Liz Cheney, because now you've had the background. And I listen, folks, I had not heard this before. I had heard the things we do for Orange Jesus. So a little bit of a spoiler there. That's how she's going to pitch this. But this is a story from that fateful day. This is her telling a story from January 6th. And I want you to listen very carefully, because she lets the cat out of the bag. The cat rockets out of the bag. This is exactly what they honestly believe. And she's a quote-unquote Republican. Anyway, take a listen.
Goes away. In the cloakroom on January 6th, before the attack happened, I was in the Republican cloakroom. I was working on my remarks, and because I was supposed to speak that day. And there were sheets of paper laid out on the desks. And I asked one of the staffers in the cloakroom, what are these sheets of paper? Because members were coming in and signing them. And this person said to me, well, those are the objection sheets, because it's only actually required that one House member object, but there were so many who wanted to show they were objecting that they'd set up these sign-up sheets in the cloakroom. And so
let me give it a pause here. It's a little bit of a long bit. Trump had 8 senators and I believe 137. But again, the articles that are going to be in the link, you can click them. All that data's in there. He had tons of them. All right. So this is how serious this was. And there's a lot of things that to unpack here, but let's let Liz continue, because just carefully listen. And I mean, this is a bombshell.
Sitting there, a member came in and he signed his name on each one of the state's sheets. And then he said under his breath, the things we do for the Orange Jesus. And
now, before we get to that, because I want to debunk the Orange Jesus thing, because that's the way I found the bit this morning when I was doing my reading, and I just blown away. And the other good thing is we now have 26 seconds left. So when I go back to it, 26 seconds, and wait for the big reveal, because it's huge. But I want you to understand that she tells this story, and I covered the January 6th committee, and I remember when she told it, I said, look, you don't know what that means. I know you are trying to say it purports to mean, oh my God, I break the law, I do unconstitutional things, I demean myself for the Orange Jesus, right? What I think it means, what I interpreted when the person came in was, hey, you know what, Liz? I ain't in a district like you, 90% Republican. I mean, I'd rather not get into this, but I got to put my name on it, even though it's just another name. He only needs one of each, but he wants me on there because I don't want to. So what? There's nothing to that. It doesn't mean anything nefarious. It could actually be innocent. And I think it probably was innocent. I think it is probably what the person meant. So she's trying to tell the story, and the point of this is to talk about how, oh, see, isn't it funny, the Orange Jesus and what they'll do for Orange Jesus? But she really lets the cat out of the bag here.
I thought, you're taking an act that is unconstitutional. And that's, I think, the most imperative and near-term and perilous question we have right now is, how do we get back to a place where we have a party that is focused on these conservative principles and substance? All
right, you're taking an act that's unconstitutional. How? I just read the whole procedure to you in the Electoral Count Act of 1877. You get one person to, I object, just like Raskin did when 20 of the people were not this. I believe there was fraud at the election. In Pennsylvania, that there is no mail-in balloting. There's no legislative law. The governor decreed it by fiat. That's my objection. It's in writing. I have a congressman, I have a senator. Listen to it again. I mean, I was floored when I heard this morning.
You're taking an act that is unconstitutional.
No, you're not. But you see, this is the mentality that leads to where we are right now. And I'm not now talking about Jack Smith and January 6th. I'm now talking about everywhere. Everywhere somebody's prosecuted, this is the type of person. The law is what I say it is. Yeah, how do you plead? Not guilty. You're obstructing this proceeding. I'm not down on that. But the law says I get to plead. Not that's obstruction. That literally, to her mind, right, objecting to the certification of Joe Biden, wanting to have your objection heard and then debated in the House and the Senate, that is an unconstitutional act to her. Okay? I mean, we got other things in the show, but that's basically what's going on where we are here. So that's where we're going with the Jack Smith indictment. That's what they're going to show. They're going to try to prove that challenging Biden's certification in and of itself was the violation of the law. Okay? And even though Trump was following the procedure as laid out by the Electoral Count Act of 1877, which is absolutely permitted under the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, that is going to be how they get him. Now, it's interesting because there are things, and I covered the January 6th committee. If you subscribe to our YouTube page or if you're on Rumble, that's all on Rumble because they sync up. We covered the January 6th committee at the time. The January 6th committee never had anything. The January 6th committee only ever proved one thing, right? And I watched them in good faith. I took them seriously. I was really hoping that they would come up with something. They're not going to come up with something, folks. This is how bad this is. It literally is, you followed the procedure laid out by the Electoral Count Act of 1877. That's right. That's obstruction. You can't do that. That's conspiracy to defraud the United States of America. Once we declared that Biden was the winner, right, that's it. You're not even allowed to follow the procedure. And they don't have to do that. There are ways they could get around and go after Trump. But honestly, the only thing the January 6th committee proved about Trump, and this is what they proved, and to be fair, they may have a point about this. It's not illegal. It is criminalizing political dissent, but on the House floor, you can tell because he's all masked up because back then Pelosi was tyrannically making people wear masks. But let's listen to Kevin McCarthy. This is the only thing the January 6th committee ever proved. This is the only thing that happened on January 6th. It may not be pleasant. I agree probably in some ways it isn't. But this is the truth.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding. These facts require immediate action by President Trump. Accept his share of responsibility, quell the brewing unrest, and ensure President-elect Biden is able to successfully begin his term.
Now, folks, he's almost right. He misses one thing. He said he should have immediately quelled the violence. He did. Within 10 minutes, he was on Twitter. I think 25 minutes, he was on Twitter again. It's only 187 minutes if you measure from the end of the speech all the way to the Rose Garden speech, which Twitter promptly took down when he put up. All that being aside, this is the point that they really have. What they really ticked off about and what they're really angry about is that for whatever reason, Trump had a rally that day. I honestly don't understand it because one of the articles, and let me click back on it, it's probably the best article on this if you want to just read one of my 4 articles on it. Let me make sure I get it up there. Yeah. It's called Proof That January 6th Was Not an Insurrection. I published it on January 6th, ironically, of 2023. That talks about the idea that Trump's idea, at least as near as we can tell, was to get a rally there, to get a bunch of people there so that these Republicans, the 137 Congress people and the 8 senators, they would have the stones to get up and go through with this process. Now, spoiler, and again, you can find all this in the articles. They did. What happens with the Electoral College is they're called in order. So Arizona was the first one that they had objections. It was called, I believe, Ted Cruz of Texas. He got up, he objected, he had Congress people, and they were just starting to lay out the objections they had to the Arizona delegates when the Capitol is breached. That's when they're all taken out of the Congress. They're all wheeled away. For about 5 or 6 hours, they could not get the order reestablished in the Congress. And when they couldn't do that, right, all this, what we know as quote unquote January 6th was going on. And while all that was going on, no objections to the certification process would go forward. 5 or 6 hours later, I think approximately 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, they reconvene, and Ted Cruz and the other 137 Republicans say, you know what, we're done with this. We withdraw the objections, and then Biden is certified. And so the point of this article was proof that January 6th was not an insurrection is Trump wanted them to peacefully and patriotically. This is an indisputable fact. The fact is his plan, which again was in the papers, everybody knew about it, and we're going to go over that in a little bit detail when we start talking about these electors that are up for prosecution in Michigan, and soon to be in Arizona and every other Democrat jurisdiction, right? That interrupted the plan. He'd spent months doing this, and as soon as the Capitol is breached, they pause it, and then after all the hullabaloo, they withdraw it. So the last person that wanted that was Trump. He didn't want that. He wanted his objections to be heard. Again, the plan was, all right, and again, you hear this from a lot of quote-unquote, I heard Ben Shapiro say it the other day, Vice President Pence did not have the right to overturn the election and didn't have the right to say who won. That's not what the plan was. That was never the plan. The plan was the Vice President has the power under the Constitution, right, under the 12th Amendment, under the process of the Electoral Count Act of 1877, just as it was done in 1876, to go, whoa, I'm not doing this. I've got 2 delegates from those states are out. Those states are out. Or he could say, hey, go back to Pennsylvania and come with me with one group. Pick which one it is. I don't care. And one of 3 things would have happened. 1, enough electoral votes would have been disqualified for Trump to win. 2, the election would have been kicked to the House. And just so you understand, the House does not vote. Even though Democrats had a majority in the House, it's not the way it works. It's 1 state, 1 vote. So the fact that you got a 30-plus margin in California is about worthless to you because California only gets 1 vote. Georgia gets 1 vote. That's it. So it would be 1-to-1 if you went there. Even though in terms of the number of Congress people, you'd be way up. Not the way it works. Guess who controlled more states in 2020? Trump. That's why he would have won. So if you kicked it there. And then the other thing, and again, all this has been revealed by Peter Navarro, Steve Bannon, and others. All the quote-unquote conspirators have all said this out loud. The third idea was, well, if we can't get one of those 2, those are preferable. If we can't get those, then what we'd like to get is at least some media attention focusing on this so they see what's going on. We get public opinion behind us. And people go, yeah, what did happen in Pennsylvania? Yeah, why did they stop counting ballots at this time? Yeah, what was going on there? That was the plan. Folks, that's called democracy. That's called a democratic republic. That's called following the law. And the Democrats, I've said this the last couple of days that I've been back on the air. They are so petty. They won. It's over. It didn't work. For whatever reason, whether it was a false flag or not, you quashed it. But no. You're going to jail. We're going to punish your political dissent. That's what this is all about. But anyway, so there's indisputable fact that happened. And the point of this article is you can't have it both ways, folks. Either Trump wanted the violence, which I never understood. There's no way to win with violence. You can't. I've laid out 2 ways you could win under his plan, which is modeled on the election of 1876, which go to Wikipedia and look it up. It's not an unpopular election. It's a well-known fact in history. That was the plan. Violence doesn't get you there. I've never understood that. You can hang Pence, you can capture Pelosi. Under the Constitution, so what? You don't get the presidency. You don't get to stay in power. That's just not the way any of that works. Anyway, so that is something that they can never answer, and they've never tried to answer. The other article, and we're going to move on to the electors. Gosh, I just saw the clock. All right, I thought I'd be able to get it done sooner than this, but hopefully I'll be able to hold it under an hour if I can. So anyway, so that was what was going on January 6th. Another article that's up, we put up on April 30th, 2022. No, Trump didn't commit a crime on January 6th. That basically lays out the basics of the Electoral Count Act. It has the Eastman memo in it. And let me just pull up the Eastman memo just for a moment so you'll see. So here's the Eastman memo. Here it is right here. It's a CNN where you can actually see the actual memo. It's on the screen now if you look at it. This is his roadmap for how you would challenge Biden's certification in the Electoral College, and it's a January 6th scenario. And the reason I point this out and the reason I pull it up is you can find it in this article. Again, none of this was a secret. None of this. This was all out in the open. Everybody knew what was going on. They were following the law to the letter. So one other thing before we get to the alternate slates, because I want to cover that before we sign off today. But one other quick thing you have to understand what January 6th is about. And this was the first article I ever wrote on the January 6th issue, was on December 30th of 2021, okay? And that was an article about that came up because Mark Elias he's been the general counsel of every Democrat campaign going back to, I want to say all the way back to 1988 and 92. I think he was originally with the Clintons, and he might have been Dukakis's general counsel, but he's the architect of all these lawsuits and all this other stuff. Well, anyway, he tweeted on December 21st of 2021, my prediction for 2022. Before the midterm election, we will have a serious discussion about whether individual Republican House members are disqualified by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. What does Section 3 of the 14th Amendment say? It says, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of vice president or president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military in the United States or any state who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or an officer of the United States or as a member of a state legislature or as an executive judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States. Basically, anybody in government in the USA, Fed, state, whatever, if you took an oath to uphold the Constitution, right, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid to comfort to the enemies thereof. That he tweeted, ladies and gentlemen, on December of 2021. And I show you now Exhibit A of exactly where all this nonsense started. Now, I don't think even Elias, in his biggest wet dream, ever had any idea you'd see within a couple years Jack Smith doing what he's about to do. But he started the ball rolling. This was, at first, they wanted to just go, oh, well, you engaged in insurrection. Trump, everybody else, members of, you 137 that were going to object to Biden's certification? Oh, you 8 senators? Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, you're not eligible. That was an insurrection. You took an oath. You get the idea. It started there. Now, again, I was working on it then. This is a 2-part article. And if you go here, you can click on the second part. I think we did about a week later. It was a pretty long process. And this was a bombshell at the time, folks. This was a bombshell. The January 6th committee would come later, right? And they would piggyback on this idea, and that was one of the reasons they came into being, and it was one of their purposes was to try to prove an insurrection, so that then all these people were ineligible. They tried to kick out Marge Green. They tried to kick out the guy in the wheelchair. I can't remember his name right now. They tried to kick out a couple of others. I can't remember, and all of them failed. Except for, I think it was Madison Cawthorn's guy who I was thinking of. He didn't win, so it didn't matter. But the courts refused to, although some of the courts bit. They didn't go as far enough to say that he wasn't going to be on the ballot, but they bid a little bit enough. Some of the courts just threw it out and said there wasn't. But this was where this all started. And one of the things that's going on right now with the Democrat Party is there are no guardrails. None. Nobody's pushing back. If anybody pushes back, if you're an Alan Dershowitz or you're a Jonathan Turley, and you push back Glenn Greenwald, you push back Matt Taibbi, you push back in any way, shape, form, or fashion, you are, right, you're expunged from the party. You're excoriated, you're out. They don't permit any dissent of any kind. And because of that, they never hear anybody going, hey guys, yeah, this might be a little too far. I mean, yeah, this whole Trump thing, I mean, he's going up in the polls and it literally looks like we're prosecuting him unfairly. They never hear that. They have no idea that that's happening. Anyway, I want you to understand and see if I can do this. I'm going to try to click on that tweet. Oh, he's since deleted the tweet. Now, why would you delete that tweet if you're Mark Elias and you're on the up and up? Yeah, anyway. So nobody would have saw that coming. And then one other article yet, and I'm just going to cover this briefly because golly, it's 40. I see the clock. All right, I'm going to try to wrap it up in 10 minutes, but I've got to get to these electors so you understand what's going on there. I wrote this article on May 21st of 2020, Anatomy of Yet Another Hoax. So this was when the January 6th committee was all up and running, all right? And they sent subpoenas to everybody. If you were anywhere within 10,000 miles of D.C. on January 6th, you got a subpoena. And they got all this stuff. And so one of the things they got was that Jenny Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas, was going back and forth with Mark Meadows and a bunch of other people, okay? And they tried to say, oh, she's in on the insurrection. Everybody's in on the insurrection. Anybody that challenged this and said there was something wrong here was in on the insurrection. So you can read that for yourself. But the point of it is, and this gets us to where I want to go next, to the alternate slates that are going on. But the point of this, just so you understand and you see this, because I've been writing about this again for years now. I saw all this stuff in real time, and it wasn't that hard to see if you were paying attention, but most people have time for that, right? But basically, anybody that talked about Biden being illegitimate or Biden having problems or there being problems with the election, they were all in the coup, they were all in the insurrection. And it's just a hoax. I mean, there's nothing to it. Well, now let's flash forward to what happened yesterday, and that would be right here. So that gets us to the alternate slate of Michigan. Let's hear from the Michigan Attorney General. Again, this broke late last night, and this all relates to the whole process I told you. Now, you understand now that there is no breaking of the law that Trump did because he was following the law. But that doesn't matter because Jack Smith now says by following the law, you're obstructing Congress. Okay. I mean, I don't know how I can obstruct Congress by following the procedure laid out by the Congress in 1877, and it's still the law, but okay, here she is.
The groundwork was laid for a plan to send alternative slates of Trump's electors to Congress in an attempt to outmaneuver and circumvent the long-standing Electoral College process. As part of the orchestrated plan,
Now, folks, by the way, I hadn't heard this before, so I'm listening at the same time. I just laid out the process. What are you talking about, lady? There's a whole objection process. Ted Cruz got up. He objected to Arizona. He had 137 Congress people. You heard Liz Cheney. I was in the cloakroom. They were signing the sheet. It's in writing and they signed. What are you talking about? How are you going to circumvent it? They're not circumventing anything, lady. That's the process. Now, here's the underpinning constitutionally. I told you about the election of 1876, and I told you about Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana. Don't hold me to that. I'm pretty sure on 2 of them. I'm not sure about Louisiana, but it doesn't matter. The 3 states, they sent 2 electors. Do you think, folks, in your logical mind, that Florida said, well, I'm hereby convene and I'm going to send 1 slate, and then the next week they decide, well, you know what, screw it, that's not the slate we want to send? No, it's the same scenario. Of course, people who on the other side of the debate thought the people in charge, quote unquote, whatever that meant, right? The Republicans sitting in there through military rule, or the Democrats who thought they were the lawful. I mean, there was a political dispute. So they sent 2 different electors. That's what happened. Also, just so you understand the process, if the objection is sustained and they look at you and they go, well, President Trump, where are your electors? Huh? What are you talking about? Well, we've sustained your objection, so we're tossing out Pennsylvania's because your objection is sustained. Where are your electors? If you give me like an hour, I'll go. No, sir, you don't have electors. Okay, Pennsylvania is now not voting. I mean, there's no logical way for this to work, right? And I'm going to get to something else she said there when I get to Rachel Maddow. But again, I've already told you the second problem with what she's saying. Folks, they didn't just meet and come up with a scheme and electors, right? They showed up that day. And we'll get to the second thing they did.
that 16 Michigan residents met covertly in the basement of Michigan GOP headquarters and knowingly and of their own volition signed their names to multiple certificates stating that they were the duly elected and qualified electors.
All right, so you're seeing a lot of this out there. Again, I saw this everywhere. I think somewhere even somebody tweeted something that they were told to keep it quiet. And again, this, folks, this is like Neo in the Matrix. This is literally just softballs being tossed up. This is a joke. They didn't meet in secret, folks, because as soon as they met, right, and they did whatever they did and they signed all the documents, they got together and they mailed them to the Congress as per the protocol, with their names and their signatures and notaries on them. There was nothing secretive about it. They showed up on January 6th. As I've already told you, the AP, the Wall Street Journal, right? The Washington Post had said in advance, this is what they're going to do. This has never been a secret. Let's see if we can find Rachel Maddow real quick. Because I tried to find the one. Oh, don't tell me I lost Rachel. We got to have Rachel. Did I lose Rachel? Where are you, Rachel? I did lose Rachel. No, I didn't. Here she is. Here's Rachel Maddow. I tried to find the one she did in December. This is a few months after December. I think she did this one on January. But take a listen to Rachel Maddow. She's here talking about the 2020 electors from Wisconsin. But the same thing applies. Take a listen.
To meeting to describe themselves as the electors from the state of Wisconsin, even though they weren't. We subsequently learned that this group of Republicans in a state that Biden won, they put pen to paper. They not only declared that day that they were the real electors, and they were electors for Trump, they actually drew up forged documents in which they tried to impersonate real electors. They purported to be the actual electors from the state of Wisconsin. And they apparently sent them in to the National Archives and to the Congress.
All right, here you go. Here's what's on the screen if you're listening and doing your walk or working out at the gym, right? President of the Senate, United States Senate, by registered mail. Archives of the United States, by registered mail. Secretary of State, State of Wisconsin, by certified mail. Chief Judge, United States District Court, Western District of Colorado, by certified mail. Now, folks, if you're doing something nefarious, do you write down, sign your name, make copies, and by registered mail, mail it to these people? Obviously, they thought what they were doing was proper, right? In this country, we don't, well, that's not true. We actually do charge some people, but it's very rare. It's called strict construction, not strict construction. It's called, what is the term I'm looking for? It's not strict construction. It's, the name will come to me in a minute. But anyway, there are very few things in the country that if you do it, you're guilty. Mens rea or the mental element is not. One of them is statutory rape. Strict liability. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you. Anyway, that means it doesn't matter. All the prosecutor has to prove is you had sex with that girl and she was underage. Your mental state is irrelevant. You could have thought she was 30. It doesn't matter. She could have showed you an ID that said she was 30. Jesus himself could have come up and said, yep, she's 30. Doesn't matter. Strict. Doesn't work that way. Most crimes, you have to show intent. And these people are so deranged, they're not even remotely trying to be consistent with any of this stuff. They don't understand where they are or what's going on. They've lost any boring from reality, right? There's no reason to prosecute these people. They lost. The whole plan didn't go forward. None of it happened. Setting that aside, and I'm not making a statute of limitations argument because that's not really relevant here. The point is you've known about it for ages. The point I was trying to make earlier is when Mark Elias dropped that little tweet in December, it was just a little seed, just a little match in a fire. He had no idea he was going to burn the whole forest down. And here's where we are. Everybody knew about this. And it's not a forgery for flipping's sake. They weren't purporting to be anything. They were just going through the procedures in case the objection is sustained. Here we are, ready to go, ready to vote. All right? And again, I've already gone over the other two things. That Jamie Raskin did it. He didn't get prosecuted. All those actors putting out, trying to get faithless electors to vote the other way, they didn't get prosecuted either. That should tell you a lot about what's going on.
For President and Vice President of the United States of America for the state of Michigan. That was a lie. They weren't the duly elected and qualified electors, and each of the defendants knew it.
All right, again, so, okay, it was a lie. Again, obviously, I've already provided you the factual basis of why they did what they did. I provided you the legal basis because they have to have people there to vote in case the objection is sustained, which was a long shot, and they knew it at the time that they did it, right? But she goes, it was a lie. I mean, look at the face of this woman. I hope you're watching this on YouTube or the Rumble or Twitter. I mean, look at that face. Does that look like the face of somebody who is a calm, dispassionate person who's going to apply the rule of law? Or does that look like somebody who's on a political vendetta? Lady, you don't need to, again, if they'll, by the way, if you want to email the show, people do a lot. I get the I Feel Cheated crowd. They're actually quite active. But you can email me at publius@gamcast.net, publius@gamcast.net, and I'll read every email and we'll respond. But look, folks, here's how you push this if you do. You go, look, I understand these people were just trying to do the best that they could. I understand they may have been caught up in all of the things that Trump was telling people that weren't true. But Unfortunately, folks, they overstepped their bounds. They crossed over a line, and we cannot have people recreating government documents, even if they do so with the best of intentions, and it's obvious to all that those aren't actually genuine government documents. Something like that, right? This idea that you're an evil human being and you have done something that warrants 20 years in jail, not to mention the conspiracy charge they'll try to pop on top of it. I mean, these are people, this is clear what it is, and part of the evidence, and by the way, I haven't had a chance to say this since I've been back broadcasting, but you see this all the time on Twitter. No evidence, no evidence, there's no evidence. These people don't know what evidence is. Everything is evidence. What they mean is when they say no evidence, no conclusive evidence, maybe. But just her face and just her attitude, just her demeanor is evidence that this is political. Now, is it conclusive? I'm not saying it is. But when you look at everything else that's going on here, it certainly is a little bit of a, cherry on top.
They carried out these actions with the hope and belief that the electoral votes of Michigan's 2020 election would be awarded to the candidate of their choosing instead of the candidate that Michigan voters actually chose.
Again, I guess she reads minds in her spare time. So when she's not working for Michigan, doing whatever she does, she goes around, maybe she's at the carnival or something. She doesn't know what they thought. I've already told you what the plan was. And these people went along with the plan that was, hey, we've got to go through these motions to get these objections heard. And we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know if Pence is going to send us back home and give us 6 days and then come back. We have no idea. Right? Nobody has any idea. One more thing I wanted to cover, and this is a good place than any to cover this. This is not as though having multiple electors show up is unusual. It happened in 1876. It also happened in 1960. In 1960, right, Kennedy originally lost, and so they sent a slate of electors that had Nixon on there. Well, it turns out they did a recount, and then Kennedy won. Right. And so they sent another slate to go for Kennedy. Now, it wouldn't have mattered because Kennedy won the election by enough. But at that time, in the Electoral College, the vice president would have been Dick Nixon, who also was the candidate. And he had to decide which electors was he going to seek. Now, I'll be fair because I believe in being fair. The difference was in this case, you had one set of electors that were by the legitimate legislature of Michigan. And you had this other set that were, GOP representatives on the opposition, right? But these were both from the same legislative body. But to be fair, Nixon, again, there's a record of this. You can go look this up here and take my word for it. He literally said that there's no precedent for this, and I'm not trying to bind any future president of the Senate operating in this capacity, but I hereby find that the legitimate electors are those that vote for Kennedy. And his rationale was they were the latest ones. And so I interpret them sending a group afterwards to overrule the first one. Perfectly rational basis to do it. But from that rational basis, you can also infer, as Eastman did, that Vice President Pence, he didn't have the power to overturn the election, as some on our side like Eric Erickson and Ben Shapiro say, but he did have the power to rule on disputes such as this, right, where you've got two slates. Or, well, somebody's objecting to Pennsylvania's electors, etc. Anyway, all this to say this, folks, even assuming for the sake of the argument, and I'll leave you with this. Oh, there's nothing going on here. It's not political. No one's above the law. No one above the law is the new to both sides do it. When somebody says no one's above the law or both sides do it, just run. Because they're imbecilic and they're about to waste your time and they have nothing good to offer. You could argue that if you want, but folks, why make it a highlight case? Why not just under the table, not that you're trying to keep the media out, but just bring these people down, say, look, I'm going to charge you with this. I can't let this go. I've got to charge you with this, this, and this, and this, right? You don't have to go to the cameras and announce this and have a press conference and look into the camera. This is pure hatred of the other side. This is not just fundraising, not just election interference. This is absolutely going after your political opponents. That's what this is, right? I wasn't going to, I don't want you to feel cheated, but I was not going to go into the actual charges. But here's the point about that, and I'll close with this. Sure, there's some law somewhere on the books that makes everything a crime. And this is one of the points I want you to take away from this podcast is, if you are going to interpret statutes in the way that the judge out in California did for the January 6th committee and Jack Smith is doing it, then there is no law. And this is not a unique idea in history, okay? If you read Ayn Rand, if you read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, if you read The Road to Serfdom, if you read any of your history, The Darkness at Noon, all left-wing authoritarian governments do this. The law is whatever they say it is. And if they can read it, and even though it says Saturday, that somehow means Friday in their mind, and there's nothing you can do about it. That is not the rule of law. That is where we are right now. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this. If you did, click the like button and all that good stuff. Subscribe. And we will be back tomorrow. Hopefully you'll join us for GAMcast tomorrow. And again, we are planning to go live back on our old schedule at 11 a.m. I've had things to do this week, so I haven't been able to do it, but we will be live tomorrow at 11 a.m., and it will be a more standard, just news of the day. I know this one was a little bit of a special episode, but trust me, there's no other news of the day that's worth covering other than what we covered here, so hope we'll see you tomorrow.